Hi everyone, welcome to episode 3, although this is the fourth video because episode 0 is named episode 0. So here we are again. It's Pastor Richard, and
Kim Keys, hello.
here we are with our mental health and well-being podcast. Hopefully you've watched the others ahead of this one that have been released over the preceding weeks, or you're watching this down the line and you're watching them all in one day. Who knows? It's like binging
You're
TV.
binging it.
You're binge watching a podcast on mental health and well-being. You
I'm not saying that I've ever done that ever.
know. Having said that, I'm about to binge watch some training videos, so we'll get there. Anyway, in this episode, we'll be talking a little bit about resources and also some self-care. That was kind of the last topics to have from the evening from Spurgeon Sorrows. The questions came from y'all. So hopefully these podcasts will have been helpful, and also maybe we've got some more questions and we'll be back in the future with some future episodes and some updates. But for right now, we're going to be looking, as I say, at resources and self-care in the main. So, what are we going to be talking about under those topics?
I mean, there's a lot. I think the beginning and we were talking a little bit just before this podcast sort of started about some of the resources and some of that. My hands are a little bit tied because I'm not in the area, but it sounds like you have a lot that it's coming down the pike around resources locally to the valley, right?
Absolutely. So, fortunately, we have been doing some lots of work behind the scenes getting ready. And part of that is some online training, some accreditations, stuff like that that's happening for our facilitators and leaders and one thing and another, and for those of us who are just involved. And one of the institutes that we're going to be training through, once we've done that training, has some resources available that even though they are not local, they keep up to date, very up to date resources that are local, a list. So we'll have a hotline that we'll be able to call when there is a need. They'll be able to give us the latest, greatest, best information local to us. And if none of that resource for some reason is hitting the mark or available right at that moment, they also have people that we can talk to and the person involved that needs the specific help. Because remembering, we are not counselors. Kim
Mhm.
is. She's out of state. She's not here. We wish she
I'm
was.
not licensed in Oregon.
Not licensed in Oregon. I'm not licensed at all. Never will be as a counselor. I'm your pastor. But we are always going to be able to refer people. But they have people who are trained on the other end of the phone to talk on a deeper level and hopefully fill a little bit of a gap in the meantime. So, all that to say, we're going to have some great resources available locally in the valley, and that list will be up to date. Is it perfect? No, but it's going to be the best that we can possibly do, and we're going to come alongside people the best that we possibly can.
That's
So
fantastic. Yeah.
that's kind of where we're at. And also, I know one of the questions here was about suicide and homicidal thoughts and all of those kind of things that, are very emotive. We've had a number of trainings through Stephen Ministry and in the church on making sure that we take those kind of thoughts and feelings and expressions of any of those very seriously. So I would love to get your take on any of that, Kim.
I mean, agreed. I think, the challenge there, what I get a lot of the time is sort of this, well, sort of twofold. One, should I take it seriously? I think it might be a cry for attention, those kinds of things. And then on the flip side of that, sort of this feeling of panic in those moments, right? What do I do? And the thing I want to throw out there is never, even if there's a part of you that genuinely thinks like this might be a cry for help. I mean, honestly, they all are a cry for help. So we just take them very seriously. And no matter what, you would much rather be on the side of erring on the side of caution rather than, you know. So we send them in. Remember too that we now have a national 988. I don't know if everybody knows about that, but for years and years and years, we've had 911. And that's what you call in an emergency, in a physical emergency. And unfortunately, that's always been the closest that we can get to with mental health. But now we have National 988. And so you can pick up the phone and dial 988 in the same way you would dial 911, and it routes you to a local call center. And it's somebody that will immediately pick up and talk you through. So if that person is really in a crisis, they can call that number as well. And that will get them plugged while you, as a supporter, are working on getting them into services that they have that as well.
Yeah, well, that's good to know because, like you say, that is that moment of panic. What do I do? I need to do something. Responsibility, So yes, to have something concrete that we can take a step in the right direction is huge. Yeah. So
The
yeah.
other thing that a person can do and the church can do as a whole is if you have some concerns and you can't get that person to go to the hospital,
Mhm.
you can call a welfare check. And really what you do is call the police. I know that sounds really scary, but most police departments, and if they have like in Idaho, we have what's called CIT, the Crisis Intervention Team, and it's police that are accompanied usually with counselors or social workers. And so they respond to that person or that event and they just do a check. That's
Right.
all they do. And if at some point they think that there is a real serious threat of danger, whether it be suicidal or homicidal, and I put homicidal in there just to remind everybody,
Mhm.
that's a real thing. We
Yes,
oftentimes avoid it because nobody wants to really think that that's a real thing, but it really is a real thing. And perfectly lovely people can have that ideation as well.
totally. Totally. I know when I speak to people, when I'm talking about confidentiality, for example, when I'm interviewing a referral for Stephen Ministry, and we talk about confidentiality, but I do always say there's limits to that. And it's if you tell me you are either hurting somebody else, somebody's hurting you, you feel like you're going to hurt yourself or somebody else. So, all of those things we have to take a step further with
Yep,
those things. And I'm not going to promise that I'm going to keep that completely to myself, unfortunately, or
really good.
whichever
And
way
nor
you're
should it
looking
be
at it.
that way.
No, definitely.
Part of your job is protecting that person, sometimes
Yes,
from themselves and protecting the community.
definitely. Definitely.
Mhm.
So that's
Yeah. So I just wanted to make sure everybody knew 988 is there, but also you can call a welfare check because a lot of times people don't know that they can do that.
That's right. Yeah. So I know from I'm more experience of this in the UK than I do in America,
Yeah.
even though I've been here for nearly 20 years now. But there is the mental health team in the UK, and that's exactly what they do. They work alongside the police, and it is licensed counselors and the social workers and social services and that kind of thing. And that's exactly what they do. They go out and check on people, and they have those skills and resources. So yeah, so it's wonderful to know we're not alone out there, but
Nope.
sometimes it feels that way. So
It really does. And I think the more we do know about our local resources and what they can all do, I think that's really helpful. Something that your community can do with the church is that they can even call, in Idaho, at least we can do this. I would imagine Oregon, they can do this as well. I know Mississippi, they did this. But you can call the police department and request a ride along with their crisis team. So you can see exactly what that all looks like so that when you're in a situation where you're having to call in that kind of help, you have a good idea of what that means because it can be really scary for the other person when you're saying something like, I'm really worried about you. You won't take yourself to the hospital. I think I need to submit a welfare check. And what they think is cops and SWAT are going to come bust down my door, right?
right,
And
that's
I'm
right.
like,
And I'm going to be arrested and put in a cell, and I'm never going to get home again. And
exactly.
this
And
is not the
it's
case. And
not the
as you
case.
say, to have had an experience of that and that what that looks like, and that this is done professionally and in a
Yeah.
caring way. Yeah, that's super supportive. The other thing I was going to mention is that recently we've been working alongside the Rock Recovery Center, and a lot of people may think that that is just for maybe alcoholism or drugs, but we've had some wonderful success in being able to direct people there and have an ongoing relationship with them. They've been able to step in and help a few folk over the last several years, actually, that we've known them. And Doug Gould, who's been with has trained some of our Stephen ministers, done some of the continuing education for them, and spoken at the church on occasion, and that kind of thing. So there are resources out there. There is a role for the church. There is a time when we definitely rely on professionals, and so that is kind of answering those questions that people were asking about what are the resources, right? And also what are the long term? I think one person was asking what are the long term resources for those who've had years and years of mental health
Yeah. Yeah.
conditions or
I,
situations.
I love these questions, and I think it bleeds into some of the other questions too about like what the role of a church can be.
Mm.
This is where I really, in some ways, miss Oregon as a mental health provider because Idaho really struggles in this arena. Basically, if you have a mental health condition, the best you're going to get is 30 days, and that's it.
Wow.
Oregon does have quite a bit more robust services, um, both professionally that are insurance driven, those kinds of things. But even that, those kind of services are going to be a little bit more limited. They're kind of I don't really know how to articulate it, but they're sort of spot checks usually along a person's life. Where let's take schizophrenia as an example. Most folks with schizophrenia spend a lot of their time really well and lucid, and things are doing really, things are going, they're clicking along, and then all of a sudden that they have a break, and so there's these moments of time where that support is needed. And so that's really where those services and knowing as a church, really knowing what those resources look like, I think is really helpful. But I think the real beauty of a church community is that you're this little microcosm of like I'm just a firm believer of like it takes a village to raise a child sort of a thing. And honestly, I think it takes a village to raise most adults, myself included. I still sort of just like bounce around the world and expect, and hope that the people in my life are going to kind of keep me like checked. And I think that's the beauty of a church and what it can do. Oregon's got some really interesting models that are full wraparound service models. So back to our person with schizophrenia as an example, if and when that illness progresses to the point where that person might need long-term care, right? So what we try to do, think of it sort of like the different levels of you have nursing home, right? And then you have like memory care, and then you have assisted living, right? There are these levels. So there's levels of that for mental health as well. Go ahead, you were going to say something.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, I'm in my hospice world. I'm
Exactly.
you have at home with carers coming in, perhaps if family are overwhelmed, one thing or another, and then you have, assisted livings, adult foster homes, skilled nursing, memory care, at these different levels. And so, yeah, and how those interact with each other. And also
Exactly.
there's an emotion attached to that for the people involved, wow, I'm gonna have to go somewhere else. I'm going to have to go into a different kind of level of care if they're aware, and some people are not once they get to a certain level. But that it's a lot for the family as well because there's no emotions attached to I can no longer care for my person at home. And even
Hmm.
though that is the best situation for them, and I also try and encourage people that, as much as that is your loved one and you're caring for them, the best thing you can do at this point is seek placement, and then you can step out of being the 24/7 caregiver and return to being the spouse, the child, the
Yep.
parent, whatever that might be. And so, and also, some of those places are more suited to some people than others. So it's finding where those places gel and do, and then there's a whole level of what things cost and how they're funded and all these kind of things. And it really does take an expert. So fortunately, I move in those worlds. I do not have all that expertise, but I do know some folk that do.
Well, I love that. And if you apply that same model, those of you who have kind of that understanding of how it works for our aging population, then you'll understand a better idea of how it works for our mental health population, at least in Oregon, because those systems of care are there.
Mm.
They are there for a family caregiver who just needs respite care, or somebody who comes into the home and helps in that way, or assisted living where the person is living independently, but they still need spot checks, making sure like let's check your medications, let's check and make sure that you're doing your dishes and your house is clean and there's not like flies in the refrigerator, because believe it or not, those things are indicators of somebody sliding,
Mhm.
right? So they don't need somebody all the time, but they need somebody who's going to go, oh, we need to double check your meds. Let's get you in with your psychiatrist because something is slipping, all the way up to full long-term group home care, right? That's similar to like memory care and things like that. Some of those facilities even are locked down because, as you know, in even with aging and things like that, if at some point if we lose the capacity, then we need those facilities to be able to help keep us safe.
Yes, absolutely. I go into some memory care units, and some of them are very wonderful, and the care is amazing. And to be honest, when you see somebody in memory care, sometimes you're wondering, are you a resident? Are you a visitor? And this is why you don't let anybody in or out.
Don't let anybody, yep, you have a little keypad and
That's
that's
right. And if
the way
that
to know.
person is legitimately able to go out, they'll know how to do that themselves or have a staff person with them.
Exactly. And
Yes.
what I love about that is that what that tells you is that's a really lovely like run organization, right? Because you, in a lot of ways, mental health is the same. I love it when you really can't tell the difference, you know? That's usually that person that what that means is those people are placed appropriately, they're being monitored appropriately and not overly monitored,
Right.
those kinds of things. Yeah. But those systems are all there. And I think the church's role
Mm,
is really being able to how do I articulate this? Being able to know those things and connect resources because you're a known entity. You were talking about the emotional toll it takes
mm.
on the families, and it's 100% true. And I think that's the beauty of a church membership, right? Is that that's where you can support and step in because you're a known entity. You've got all those relationships with those people and you can carry them over and across all of those levels of care. I
Definitely.
think it's beautiful. You can even be those levels of care to some degree. So take sort of the assisted living portion of it, or somebody who is living on their own and doing really well, but still needs kind of these spot checks to make sure they're okay.
Absolutely.
That can happen on a community level.
Definitely. People being able to be felt seen, valued, cared for, part of
Yes.
our community. I think, our church particularly, blow our trumpet just a little bit, disabilities ministry has
Love it.
similar aims and resources in that particular respect. And I think, this is where we have that role, and particularly, we're touching on the fact that we're aiming. I'm not guaranteeing exactly when, but over the next 6 months to a year, that we'll be supporting in support groups both those with mental health concerns and also the caregivers of those who have mental health concerns, right? And the phrase that keeps coming back, and I may have mentioned it in the previous podcast, but it's been a few weeks since we recorded, is we don't all have a mental health condition, but we all need to condition our mental health, right? And that keeps coming back to me, and I think when something comes back as often as it does, there's a reason for that. So that's kind of where we're at. And so, we're really talking about how we can encourage, how we can train for that. And so to update you, Kim, and people listening and watching, behind the scenes, as I mentioned earlier, some training. We've got a group now that are committed to taking that training. And it's really well known, good, solid information. Does it mean we're going to be professionals? By no means. We're being trained by professionals, but we're not going to be professionals. We're going to come alongside other resources and come alongside people as peer support. So we're really looking forward to that.
That's
And so that really touches on that question that came up about how should interested people be prepared. Well, at the moment we have a
great.
team of about 10 to 12 that have been interested enough to come along, express that interest, come along to some preliminary meetings, and now going to take some online training, and kind of that's where we're at. And we're again under promising, over delivering. So we're starting slow and we'll
Yeah,
see where the Lord leads, right? So
love it.
kind of
I
just a little update on where we're at and where we're headed at the moment. And I know the Lord has a wonderful sense of humor, so who knows where we'll be, 12 months down the road. But for right now, that's where we're at. So I think that kind of covers the resources and those kind of questions that we were given. And so we move into self-care, something that I talk about a lot and do not do as well as I could or
Nope, none
should.
of us
We
do,
don't use the word
Richard.
should, but you know what I'm saying.
None of us
Self
do.
care is not selfish, but sometimes I feel like it is. So,
There's two analogies that I use. So, well, actually, one analogy and then a comment. One is imagine yourself. the community well. Okay. Like imagine a village, there's all these people that you love that are coming to the well all the time. And if that well runs dry, the village is in a drought, right? They're in trouble at that point. So your job is to make sure that your well is full. It has to be full. Otherwise, we cannot show up for the people in our lives. The best thing that we can possibly do, everyone is here, I think, because it's not like the people who sign up to do this kind of thing because they really love and care about other people and they really want to help other people. And the best thing I can tell every single one of you is that you cannot do that without protecting yourself as well. The best thing that we can do is take care of ourselves so that we can be in this thing for a really long time. Because like you're talking about all this preparation that, you've got this team that are doing all of these trainings and all of this time that they're committing. And you and I both know that the people who are really good at this, yeah, I love the trainings. I'm not saying it's not a good thing. It's a wonderful thing and we need it. But the real training happens when we're in front of people and we're talking to people and we're running those groups and we get the questions and we get we're holding the tears and we're holding that space. And that's what our helpees, that's what they really need is the experienced people in it. And the only way we can do that is having a really, for lack of a better word, religious, disciplined self-care regimen because you're right, we're expert caregivers and we are novice care receivers.
Agreed. Absolutely. And it's kind of like, taking care of yourself emotionally, physically, and spiritually,
Mhm.
as I like to use in all of my spheres of influence and that kind of thing, talk about a three-legged stool, right?
Huh?
So, if one of those legs goes away, what happens to the other two?
Yeah,
So,
you're gonna flip over.
so we need to be taken care of emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And sometimes it's more on one than the other, but the
Mhm.
whole, yeah.
There's actually a tool, and Richard, I will commit to sending you this tool. Maybe
Okay.
when you put the podcast together, you can throw it up in the chat or something. But it's a wellness wheel, and it actually covers 7 different domains
Okay.
in a person's life. And so my encouragement to people, usually when we go over it, we just hand it out and we're like, okay. And not usually what I say is, I want you to, in each category, make yourself a list of the categories. And in each category, I want you to define 5 things, five.
Just five.
Nobody can do 5 things in each category that you are consistently doing to take care of yourself in that category.
Mm.
And by consistently, I mean if you look at your calendar or you kind of look into yourself, you've done this thing within the last week or two, and that you consistently do that. And it's physical, it's emotional, it's social, it's vocational, it's financial, it's occupational, and it's spiritual. All 7 of those things. So you actually have like a 7-sided stool. Then you really don't
Well,
fall over.
seven is the number of completion, right? So
No. So we're in good shape.
we are. If there are
No.
certain things,
It is really the thing that folks don't realize, and especially when you take on um, this kind of a project, right? This kind of responsibility. The thing that you're exposing to yourself, there's a word for it. It's vicarious trauma. When
Mm.
you walk through people who are experiencing with people who are experiencing loss, who are experiencing fear, who have experienced trauma, anxiety, depression. And by the way, any mental health condition in and of itself is a traumatic experience. It's hard to all of a sudden wake up one morning and not see a reason to live anymore. It's life-changing.
Yeah.
And when you are walking with somebody through that, you are experiencing a level of that. In fact, what those folks are doing, a lot of that time is the term that we use is ego strength. They're borrowing your ego strength quite a bit because they don't, in those moments, it's sort of, the poem Footprints,
Yes.
right? Where like I was mad at God because he just abandoned me in my moment of need. And I'm in this conversation with God and he's saying, no, that's when I was carrying you. Well, you're carrying that person,
Hmm.
right? And that's a pretty enormous weight. And we have to really, I think, acknowledge that. And so one of the questions that came up, what was it, Richard? It was something about how do I take care of my own like memories as they come up.
Oh yeah, how do you heal from painful memories? You see or hear something and it unrolls a ball of memories, not necessarily flashbacks, but a trial.
I love it. What that person is describing are triggers.
Mhm.
They're not flashbacks. Flashbacks, typically the person dissociates from the moment that they're in, and that may happen to you as well.
Mhm.
Like that's a very real thing. Heart palpitations, almost panic disorder, sort of a deal. But triggers is far more common. And all of a sudden, it can be something that somebody says. It can be a song you hear. It can be music. It can be somebody's complaining about marriage and you're really struggling in your own marriage right now. I mean, it literally can be just about anything. And that's where having, if you are creating, I think it's twofold, but if you're creating this, if we go back to that wellness wheel and you're creating a very rich life outside of this work that you do, it creates, I call them mooring lines. Anybody who's a sailor will know what I'm talking about, but they're the ropes that we throw down off the boat in order to keep us settled in the storm so that we can ideally handle the storm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. That's what those triggers are all about. And then you go and you do your breath work and you do your walks or you're running or go to the gym and you're talking to people and talking and sharing with each other is probably the most, if I were to say that, like, is there the most powerful tool, it would be that one. And I would say share the thing you're most afraid to share.
Mm,
That's the stuff that we hide, right? Like, ooh, I really like I had this experience where I was like really triggered. I was really overwhelmed and I started crying and I couldn't really pull it back in there for a little bit. Share that stuff with your team.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, that's huge. I mean, and if I go off on a rabbit trail here,
That's all right. I do it all the time.
but
We'll
what
pull each other
what
back.
strikes me is the terminology that's more recent is moral injury,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And that's kind of what we're seemingly touching on, you know, and to me, that's kind of where that triggering, that, you know, where I want to help, but I can't help, and it's causing the problem and all of this kind of thing. And, you
Mhm.
know, yeah, it's a whole it's a whole nother podcast, but it's kind of what keeps coming back and striking at me at the moment. And also the other word that you hit upon is that vicarious trauma, right? You know, that brings it. I try as hard as I can when I'm matching caregivers to care receivers, you know, one-on-one with Stephen Ministry, that if somebody's too close to a situation, you
Super
know, then I don't necessarily place them. They might be ideally suited in some respects because they've been through something similar, but it might be too similar or too soon.
too new.
And those are things that just for me, that's self-care to be aware of that, right? You know, I may have gone through this particular situation and 2 years down the road, I might be exactly the right person to come alongside somebody that's gone through something similar. I try never to use the word the same because no two situations are identical, right? But it sometimes is about that timing and being aware of those kind of situations.
I think it's huge, and I think it's twofold. On one end, it's on your end on placement and things like that. On the other end, it's the responsibility that we all have to own to be able to step up and say, "Hey, this one feels too raw for me."
Mhm.
Whether it be like whatever came up in the session or whatever was unknown before, or I didn't think it was an issue, but when I got in there and started hearing it, I realized like, oh no, it's still an issue. And that happens to all of us. It still happens to me after almost 30 years of doing this. So there's no shame in it at all. The best thing that we can do is share it and then set those boundaries and come out when we have to.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, that's why, guys, I'm still in therapy every month, you know,
I
because
love it. Get your own therapist. I mean,
we
all of
need
us.
support, right? Whether that be a professional counselor for some of us, it be a mentor, it be a
Yeah.
colleague, it be somebody that you can be completely transparent with, confidential. You know, as much as I truly believe you need to share things with your spouse, there are certain things that because of confidentiality that you just can't,
And
or at
shouldn't.
least the details of. And so but you need an outlet, right? That's safe and stuff like that. So again, this is all built in, and things to be aware of as well. So, the carers need caring for as
Yep.
well as the caree or the care receiver. And weirdly, I would suggest sometimes the caregiver gets as much from not that they would do it for this reason, but they get a lot from the care they're giving to somebody else, right?
We do, and I do as well. And I mean, to the degree sometimes that we have to kind of keep an eye and watch that sometimes, because that can get the word for it is countertransference, but the that it can become something that it's not supposed to be. But we
Mhm.
do get quite a lot, not everything though. And I mean, if for no other reason to know what it's like to sit in the other chair,
Mhm.
going and getting your own help, I think it's a phenomenal tool.
Yeah, well, exactly. And that kind of touches upon, if we haven't answered it completely, this other question here that somebody brought up about they were concerned whether their well-being is slipping as they try to give care.
And if you're not, I will say yes, 100% it is. If you're not setting boundaries and limiting, you're only one person, right? So you're gonna in this role, you're gonna realize yourself in a situation where there's 1,000 things and people coming at you from 1,000 different sides that all need help. And it's all serious and it's all very real and it's all necessary. You're only one person. It can't be just you. So you have to realize that and set boundaries where you have to in order to be able to pay attention to your own wellness wheel and your own vicarious trauma.
Mm.
And if we can't do that, like the encouragement that I usually give when I'm doing, because I do a lot of self-care trainings, and one of the things that I ask people to do is pull up your calendar, like right now, pull up your calendar and look through your calendar. And what you'll see is 100,000 meetings, right? So I'm meeting so and so here, and I've got this meeting here, and I've got to go do these sessions here, and back to back to back to back to back to back. Okay, so all if we go back to the wellness wheel, then you've identified 5 things here in these 7 domains. Where are those in your calendar?
Mm.
And the reason that's important is we tend to push the things that are not in the calendar.
Right.
They tend to come off the priority list.
Yeah.
And especially, those of you who are, parents or spouses, or how many times does your family's needs come before your own? These are not bad things. And we're not talking about making your needs more important than somebody else's. We're talking about making them as important as somebody else's. That's it. But so many times when we're in a position where we've got to choose somebody else's need versus ours, almost every time we will choose the other person, the other person, the other person, and then ourselves. That that starts to fall by the wayside, and then we're in trouble.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we will lose our own mental health.
Yeah, and I've heard people describe it in various different ways. Some say making sure you build margin into your
Yeah.
life. When I was long before I was in the ministry, a mentor of mine said, in an ideal world, you work 3 sections of the day, morning, afternoon, and evening, right? But you actually take one of them off. So if you're
Oh,
going to be working the morning and the afternoon, you take the evening off. If you're going to do morning and evening, you take the afternoon off, vice versa, whatever. I've never seen it work out terribly well for me, but that's my problem. But I think it's a good thing. And connected very much to what you said was somebody who said very early doors, because in those days, and I still have a paper calendar. Trust me, if you don't see me put it in my phone or write it down, I'm probably going to forget.
me
But
too.
but in Wales I carried a small pocket calendar, and people say something, I say, let me pull out my calendar, and they'd see me write that thing in, but they would also see things written in there that were already happening, like you say, and some of those were things, meet with blah blah blah. Well, actually, what that was a way of saying I'm not doing anything for that hour and a half.
Perfect.
I'm taking a break, but I'm putting something on my calendar.
I love it.
So at 20 something, I had to justify it to somebody. I couldn't just say, no, I can't do something. I'd have to say, no, I've already got a meeting. I have 4 churches, and sometimes I go and hide in church number 3 when
I love it.
one was being demanding.
I
Um,
love it.
but
And hopefully we get to a place where we no longer need that excuse. But
exactly, that's the
you
thing.
need the excuse, build
Maturity,
the
you can turn
excuse.
around and say it's okay to say
It's okay.
no. I could do it in the morning, I could do it in the evening, but I cannot do it in the afternoon.
Can't do it here.
Afternoon, I need to rest, read,
I'm
go
gonna
to
go have wine time
the
with my
bar.
girlfriends.
I'm going to
Yeah.
have my hair cut, whatever it might be, right?
I'm
Whatever's going to be
gonna
self.
go stare at birds for an hour. Yeah.
There you go. There you go. There's
Yeah.
quite a few of those around here.
Absolutely. And it really needs to be written down. I was listening to somebody or reading, I think it was in Forbes. He was a CEO and he was talking about how he balances this. And not that I'm a big fan of this because I love my checklists and nobody's going to take my checklists away from me. But the argument I thought was really incredible. He said, quit with the checklist because every one of those things represents a moment of time.
Mm.
So if you put that in your calendar, then you have an accurate reflection of what is possible, what I can do and what I can't do. I think it's a good, even if you're like me and you're like, nobody's taking my checklist from me, but at least it changes the way that I think about my checklist, right? That there is chunks of time, and sometimes I'll even do that in my calendar now, where I'll put in there, like a meet with time frame, and it'll just be a list of things. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. But this is when I'm going to do it.
Mm.
And I think that's really important because otherwise, what happens is those things start trumping the other things. And usually the other things are rest and I'm going for a run today and wine time with my girlfriends and I'm going to go work in my wood shop or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And that you cannot do this work. I cannot stress this enough. For any length of time, you will burn out. And then this whole world, all of these people that need all of this help are missing out on this incredible person with all of this talent and a heart for this stuff. And that's actually pretty rare.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, the other thing when we say that, I think of the single parent of the teenager, who's got a mental health condition, who feels like they're the only support, and that's why in an ideal world, and we're going to be doing 18 plus as it happens. I mean, I picked a bad example, but when there's like a single caregiver, whatever that might look like, if that person can come, whether it be the caregiver coming or the person comes to group for an hour and a half, that person needs to take a break, right? The
Yes.
regular caregiver needs to take a break for that time. And it's not like, oh, well, now I can get this done and this done and this done and this done. It might feel like that, but also looking after yourself, coming back to our self-care topic, that's the most productive thing you can probably do, even if it's taking a nap.
It really is. And you'll see them do it. Speaking of your single parent who comes to group or whatever, you'll see them do it. And usually it's on their phone. They'll come in and they're on their phone and they're like, hang on, I'm really sorry I'm late. I just need to take care of this one thing. And then they're out in the hallway for 10 minutes or whatever. And then they come in and they're answering phone calls or they're answering texts. That's what they're doing, is they're taking on way too much and they're having a really hard time carving out time for just themselves. So for therapists, I call them on it every time, not in a punishing
No,
sort of
no,
a
no,
way.
no, not at all.
It really is just, do you notice what you're doing? How many times and how hard it is for you to just set the world aside and let this just be you. Let this just be you talking to us about whatever stressors you have and getting some of that support from the rest of us.
Yeah. Well, interesting. That segues into this last question that was
Yeah.
down here, because we are on our phones all the time. We've got a screen in front of us, constantly bombarded by the world and what's going on and all these kind of things. And somebody asked, should we go on regular news fasts?
100%, yes. There's little tricks that we learn, speaking of vicarious trauma. There's levels to this, but years ago, I would love to say when this happened. And honestly, it dawned on me that I did this probably about 5 or 6 years ago. But years ago, somewhere along the line, I decided I could no longer watch news.
Mm,
I can read it because reading it lets me skip past details that I don't need to digest.
right.
I digest details like that all day long at work. So when it comes to creating a buffer for yourself, where where can you find in your life where you can limit exposure, where you don't have to have it. I can read about a car wreck on the interstate without having to read all of the details about it.
Right.
I can read about I know that there's a school shooting in, let's say, Connecticut, right? And I don't have to read the details about it. So that's one level, is paying attention to how you digest the world
Mm.
and allowing yourself to limit how, when, and where you digest it. Social media is a good example. A lot of people are getting their news off
Oh,
of social media.
right.
But what they're also doing is it's not just the news, it's not just what's happening, it's all of the comments below, which again is exposure. It's other people's panic, it's other people's stress response, it's other people's anger, it's
Mhm.
other people's judgments and shame about all of those kinds of things. So anything you can put in your life to protect yourself. And when it comes to news years ago, I think it was somewhere around 2020. It might have been earlier than that, but I started limiting myself to 1 hour a week of news. I'm like, well, sorry, it's not my day. And what's really interesting that I sort of came to realize through all of that, I had a suspicion, but I wasn't sure. What I came to realize through that is that there was nothing new from week to week, right? Sorry, there was new from week to week, but there was nothing significantly new in between the week to week. I got enough of what I needed to know to be well informed, to feel like I could be a good member of society and vote the way that I needed to vote, and be a consumer the way I want to be a consumer, and whatever I needed to do, that gave me enough without exposing myself to additional vicarious trauma. Because that's what news is, but the bad stuff sells.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. My favorite part of the news growing up was the "and finally." I don't know if that was a thing over here, but back
Uh-uh.
home it was always like, okay, you got the news. It's like a 30-minute program, and the last item on the news was called "and finally," and it'd be the stupid story, right? Or
Oh,
the
I love
funny
it.
story, or the waddling penguin story, or the man has ate 300 hot dogs story.
Got
And
the rubber ducky float.
they were actually the fun and the best parts of the news as a child. Now, my methodology with news, just so you know, and I don't know if it's the best, but it works for me, is I listen to like a 5-minute podcast in the mornings with
Uh-huh.
just the headlines. And so basically, very short.
That's all you need.
Okay, the whole thing is 5 minutes. If there is something that piques my interest and I want to know more about it, I can choose to find out more about it. But I feel that that's enough to be informed of kind of
Absolutely.
the big things that are going on, or at least what the world thinks of the big things, and then
Just
move on. And I'll be honest, I'm typically doing that while I'm shaving or doing something of that nature that I'm
exactly.
doing anyway. And I can just listen because I'm better at listening than
Yeah, I
reading.
am too. Yeah.
But yeah, whatever works for you. I think that's the thing. Sitting in front of anything, regardless of what it is, for hours and hours on end and becoming obsessed with it is probably not the way
It's usually
it's meant to
a
be.
signal. Like honestly, the loved ones in our life, that's where maybe we need to start intervening, is when we start to see that, because it's not good for our mental health.
Mm,
And to add on top of that, um, it's hard to recognize. Have you ever heard the analogy of the frog in boiling water?
yes.
Okay. So for those of you who have not, because I know it's a podcast, you throw a frog. It's a terrible analogy, and it's kind of makes me throw up, but it's real. Throw a frog in boiling water and it panics and jumps out. But if you throw a frog in, and this works for a lot of animals, then you turn it up, exactly.
Slowly turn it up.
Slowly turn it up. It doesn't have any litmus test for when it's actually getting burned, and it will just sit there. That's what's happening for us with news. So we need to recognize our own vulnerabilities in that way and guard against it. And I think the limiting of the news is really helpful. But I also think we have to add in news that we aren't regularly seeing. And that's the ridiculous stuff. That's the fun stuff. That's the joys in the life, like who won the rubber ducky contest. And my favorite one to follow every year, and my family will tell you I'm a giant nerd about it, is the fat bear contest. If anybody doesn't know anything about the cat my fat bear, check it out because it's the best thing on the planet. Everybody gets to vote.
Hey, come to this podcast for ridiculous
I know.
news.
Ridiculous news. One of the things I've done in our social media for the business is every Monday we have a positive news story.
Hmm.
because we are saturated with negative, and it's actually really hard to find the positive. You have to go looking for it. So that's the other thing I would say is yes, limit it, but also balance it.
That's good. That's good.
Mm.
I like it. I like it. Well, talking of limiting, we're kind of coming to the end of our
Are.
time on these pre-planned
Oh,
topic-wise podcasts. So
yes.
I just want to take this opportunity to thank you, Kim, so much for taking the
Sure.
time
You
and
bet.
joining
Any,
us in this adventure. And we'll see what the feedback is, and if they want us back, we'll come back. But in the
I
meantime,
love it.
those of you watching, listening, thank you for taking the time. I hope it's been helpful and meaningful. And as I say, pray for us as we just go forward to try and provide this kind of care and be cared for. And so, thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.